A gaunt male lion stood motionless in the scorched savannah, no longer fierce, only desperate. For 6 days he hadn't eaten, he hadn't roared, he hadn't slept. Instead, he stared into the distance, toward the world of humans, his natural enemy. But today, he wasn't hunting. Today, he was pleading. Behind him, under a dying tree, his cub lay fading fast. And the father knew, if no one helped, his son would never see another sunrise. The wind had always been part of the land, dry, constant, relentless. But that morning it brought more than just the smell of acacia trees and sun-baked soil. It carried something new, something sharp. A storm had passed through the southern edge of the Serengeti the night before, leaving behind a wake of sand and silence. And beneath a twisted thorn tree, a father lion stood motionless. His name was Elias. He was older now, thick-maned and scarred from seasons of fights and survival. A loner by force, not by choice, his pride lost to disease 2 dry seasons ago. Only one had survived. A cub, his son, Koa. The little lion, no more than 6 months old, lay curled into the base of the tree. His breathing was ragged, his left eye swollen shut. What had started as a mild irritation the day before, just a blink too many, had turned into a grotesque inflammation overnight. The soft fur around the eye was pulled taut, skin stretched until it gleamed in the morning light like a ripe fruit about to split. Elias watched. He hadn't moved for hours, not since Koa's first cry had turned into whimpers, and the whimpers into silence. He had licked the cub's face again and again, trying to soothe the pain with nothing more than warmth and presence. But something inside him already knew. This wasn't a scratch. This wasn't something the sun and time could heal. Koa had stopped playing. He didn't chase the beetles anymore. He didn't bat at Elias's tail, or roll in the dust, or stumble after grasshoppers. Instead, he kept his head low, favoring the good eye, sometimes walking in circles before collapsing in confusion. That morning, as the sun broke over the horizon in sheets of gold, Koa tried to stand and stumbled directly into the base of a termite mound. He collapsed, trembling. He didn't get back up. And Elias, for the first time in many seasons, made a sound that was not a roar. It was low, broken, less a call than a question, less a warning than a plea. They were alone. No other lions had been near for weeks. The territory was dry, picked over. The herds had moved east toward the riverbeds. Prey was sparse. Even the jackals had given up and moved on. Elias should have gone too, should have left with the rest of the survivors. But he had stayed, for the cub, for Koa. That decision, he now feared, might have been a death sentence. The swelling had taken over half the cub's face by mid-morning. Elias nudged him gently. Koa didn't respond. His sides rose and fell, barely, and something in the air had changed. There was a scent Elias couldn't ignore anymore. Sour, unfamiliar. Infection. It smelled wrong. It smelled final. Elias circled the tree once, then twice, his heavy paws kicking up red dust with each step. He looked to the sky, then back to Koa. The rules of the wild were simple. The strong live, the weak fade. The slow are left behind. The sick are forgotten. But those rules did not speak to this. They did not speak to love. In another life, Elias had been young and reckless. He remembered a time, not clearly, but enough, when he had injured his paw on something sharp, and before he could drag himself away, a machine had approached. A truck. It had come with strange sounds and sharp smells, chemicals and rubber. Humans? He hadn't known what they were, only that they hadn't killed him. One had removed the thorn, poured something cold over the wound, then left him. He had limped away that day, confused, but he had survived. And now, that memory surfaced like a slow wave inside him. A possibility. A risk. But the wild did not offer second chances. Koa's eye bulged outward slightly now, pulsing faintly. Elias stepped closer and pressed his nose to the cub's fur. Still warm, still breathing, but weaker, much weaker. His ribs rose and fell too slowly. His paw twitched once and then was still. Elias's heart beat louder than the silence. He had never begged, not for food, not for safety. He had taken what he needed from the world, through strength, through will. But now what he needed was not something his teeth or claws could take. What he needed was a miracle, or medicine. A light wind stirred the tall grasses. Off in the distance, barely visible, a bird took flight and then vanished. The world kept moving, uncaring. But Elias didn't. He sat, massive and unmoving, beside his cub. The sun rose higher. Hours passed. A herd of wildebeest crossed far in the distance. Dust shimmered along the horizon. The scent of water was nowhere to be found. And still he waited. That evening, just before the light dipped into the orange of dusk, Koa stirred again. A soft gasp. The eye had begun to leak, a milky fluid oozing from the corner. Elias sniffed it and recoiled. It was foul. He growled, confused, then pressed his head against the cub's flank and closed his eyes. He did not sleep. That night Elias heard the soft pad of feet in the distance. Hyenas. At least 3. They didn't approach, not yet, but their laughter echoed faintly, mocking. They could smell it too. Weakness. Elias stood. His paws were cracked and bloody from the dry soil, his body thin from days without hunting. But when the hyenas crept closer, he roared. Not once, not twice, but 3 times, each louder than the last. Dust flew from the ground. The scavengers scattered, at least for now. He returned to Koa. The cub hadn't moved. His breath had grown shorter. The swelling was pulling the eye shut entirely now. The skin around it was red, raw, and trembling. Elias lay beside him again, wrapping his massive body around the cub's. He licked the good side of the cub's face, slow and gentle. He didn't expect a response. He just needed to remember the smell, the warmth, the presence. The cub's heart still beat, but the land around them was dying. No water, no help, no others. And still, Elias waited. That night, the stars came and went. The moon rose and cast long shadows across the plain. Elias did not close his eyes. He counted Koa's breaths, each shallower than the one before. Somewhere in the back of his mind, that memory returned again. The humans. The rubbery scent. The touch that didn't hurt. The thorn removed. The pain that eased. Could they help? Would they even try? As dawn approached, the wind changed direction. It brought with it a faint new smell. Metal, fuel, something far beyond the world of lion and prey. It was faint, but it was there. Elias lifted his head, his eyes, yellow and worn, fixed on the horizon. The sky was turning pale. The 6th day was about to begin. And Elias knew, if he didn't move soon, it would be Koa's last. He rose slowly, careful not to wake the cub, not that Koa had stirred in hours. His legs trembled, but he stood tall. The dust clung to his mane, his chest heaved once, hard, then again. He looked at his son, then to the horizon, and he began to walk. Not for food, not for territory, not for survival. He walked for love, and for the faint hope that somewhere, far beyond what the wild could offer, there might still be someone who cared. The 6th sunrise had barely touched the horizon when Elias vanished behind the ridge. Dust followed his steps like a long, tired shadow. Each movement pulled on the wound in his hind leg, reopened by the sprint against the hyenas the night before. It bled now, slowly, stubbornly, but Elias didn't stop. He couldn't. Somewhere behind him, Koa lay half-conscious under the thorn tree. Every breath that left the cub's body might be the last. and still Elias walked. The land here was dry, even by Serengeti standards. Cracked soil split beneath his paws. Sparse shrubs stretched toward the sky like brittle bones. The path ahead held no shelter, no promise, only memory. A distant echo of rubber wheels and cold metal, of strange beings that smelled of antiseptic and moved without claws. Once they had saved him. Once, and now he dared hope they might save his son. The sun climbed higher. Each mile took more from him: strength, sweat, time. He passed the tracks of elephants, circles of vultures in the sky, and dry watering holes filled only with dust. But he never turned back. He didn't see the rustling in the tall grass at first. The sound blended with the wind, soft at first, then louder. It wasn't prey. It wasn't human. It was the heavy-footed, deliberate approach of something massive. Elias turned, nostrils flaring. A shape emerged from behind a low acacia tree, gray, towering, a lone bull elephant. His ears flapped once. His tusks were chipped, worn. One side of his face bore an old wound, deep, jagged, familiar. He moved with a limp and a caution born from many years on this earth, and his eyes, clouded, heavy, locked on Elias with something colder than curiosity. They stood facing one another. Neither moved. The elephant shifted his weight. His trunk curled. A deep, low rumble echoed from his chest. Elias didn't growl. He didn't lower his body into defense. He didn't show teeth. Instead, he stood still, dust clinging to his coat, blood staining the fur near his leg. He met the elephant's gaze not with challenge, but with something quieter. A silent plea. A story written in every line of his body. The way he limped, the way his head drooped, the way he refused to stop. Seconds passed. Then the elephant turned. No charge, no trumpeting rage, just a slow, heavy pivot. He walked back the way he came, vanishing behind the scrub brush like mist. Elias exhaled once, heavily, and kept walking. By late afternoon, the heat turned savage. Flies clung to the wound on his leg. His pace slowed, but just when he thought his limbs might fail him, something new appeared ahead, a thin dirt path marked by the faint parallel lines of vehicle tracks. Man-made, faint but fresh. And then, sound. It was small, distant, mechanical, a hum in the air, not the growl of a predator, not the rumble of hooves. It was electricity, propellers, a drone. Elias froze. High above, a tiny black shape buzzed across the sky, following the path like a bird with no wings. It hovered for a moment, then moved on. Elias watched it go until it disappeared over the hills. Hope flared for a moment, then sank. The machine hadn't stopped. It hadn't seen him, or if it had, it didn't care. But it meant humans were near, and that changed everything. As twilight fell, the air cooled. Shadows stretched long over the plains. Somewhere in the distance, a hyena laughed, a sharp, cruel sound. But Elias was too far from Koa to protect him now. His heart ached. Doubt crept in. What if he was wrong? What if no one would help? He had risked everything, left his cub behind, exposed, alone, vulnerable. The sun had gone, and still no sign of humans. Just endless land and quiet. Then, from over a low hill, a flicker of movement. A child. A young Maasai girl, no older than 10, barefoot and wrapped in a deep red shuka. Her small frame moved quietly among the brush, carrying a bundle of firewood across her back. Her eyes scanned the earth, looking for dry kindling. She stopped when she saw him. Time froze. Elias didn't move. The girl didn't scream. She didn't drop the bundle or run. Instead, she stood very still, her dark eyes locked on his. Elias lowered his head slightly, not in submission, not in weakness, but in something softer. The girl slowly stepped backward, one pace at a time, until she vanished into the trees. Elias collapsed. The pain in his leg flared white-hot. He had gone too far. His vision swam. The world tilted sideways. His chest heaved, dry and empty. And then, minutes later, the sound of voices. Footsteps. A vehicle engine sputtered to life. From the direction the girl had vanished, two figures approached. A tall woman in a beige uniform, gray braids tucked beneath a wide-brimmed hat, and a man with a camera slung over his shoulder. The woman stopped, holding a walkie-talkie. "It's the lion," she whispered. "He's hurt." The man raised the camera. "Don't move. He's watching." But Elias didn't rise. He didn't threaten. He lifted his head, blinked once, and looked at them. Then he did something no wild lion should do. He stood, turned, walked a few steps, then looked back, again and again. Walk, turn, wait. The woman narrowed her eyes. "He's leading us." The man laughed nervously. "To what? A trap?" But she was already moving. Her name was Dr. Grace Akello, head veterinarian for the Regional Wildlife Rescue Center. 32 years in the field. She had treated everything from orphaned rhinos to poisoned vultures. But never this. Never a lion that asked for help. They followed, 10 paces behind. The lion kept moving. The light faded, but Elias did not slow. As the stars returned and the Serengeti night cooled around them, one thing became clear. This wasn't just instinct. It was something else, something deeper, a connection. And far behind them, beneath a thorn tree, marked with the scent of blood and dust, a cub lay fading, unseen, but not forgotten. The journey had begun, and it would shake the hearts of millions. The dawn broke slow and colorless, as if even the sun was hesitant to rise that day. A soft mist clung to the edges of the thorn brush, spreading a thin veil across the dirt road where the old truck rattled forward. The woman at the wheel drove without speaking, her fingers tight around the steering wheel, her eyes locked on the distant figure pacing the ridge ahead. The lion walked with purpose. He didn't limp now, not because the pain was gone, but because he'd pushed it behind him, buried it beneath instinct and something stronger. Elias wasn't moving to survive. He was moving to save. With every few steps he paused, turned back. The truck slowed to keep its distance. In the passenger seat, Michael Reyes, wildlife vet assistant, fumbled with the radio. "No signal. Still too far from the station," he muttered. Dr. Grace Akello didn't answer. Her gaze was fixed on Elias. "I've tracked hundreds of lions," she finally said, her voice low, thoughtful. "Not one has ever done this." Michael looked at her. "You really think he's leading us?" "I don't think," she said. "I know." The road vanished into the brush, and they stopped the truck at the edge of a dry riverbed. Elias stood at the far end, watching. When the doors opened, he turned slowly and began walking again. Across the riverbed, up a small slope, and into the heart of the bush. They followed on foot now. Behind them, a second truck arrived, another vet tech and a field biologist summoned by the girl's call the night before. No one spoke above a whisper. Even the camera lens stayed low, respectful. Something about this moment did not belong to them. It belonged to the wild, and Elias knew it. He walked without hesitation, threading his way through thorn trees and brittle grass, across stretches of exposed rock that scraped his cracked paws raw. Each time he paused to look back, his eyes locked onto Grace's. And each time she nodded. "Yes, we're still here." Hours passed. The midday heat pressed down, heavy and sharp. Elias panted now, his tongue lolling from exhaustion. But he didn't stop. Not when the vultures appeared again overhead. Not when the bush thinned and the ground cracked wider. And then, just before the slope dipped, he halted. His body froze, head raised. The humans slowed. "Is this it?" Michael whispered. Grace lifted her binoculars. Below them, in a patch of parched shade, lay the cub. From a distance, Koa looked asleep. But as they approached, the truth revealed itself in silence. His chest moved, but barely. His eye, grotesquely swollen, had burst overnight. The side of his face was slick with yellow discharge. The fur clumped with dried infection. His paw twitched faintly once, then again. Grace fell to her knees. "Oh, no," she breathed. "We're late, but not too late." Michael dropped beside her, unzipping his emergency field kit. "Advanced orbital abscess," he said quickly. "Severe. Could be septic. We need to drain it now, or he won't make it." Elias stood just beyond a low bush, watching. His shoulders were tight, muscles coiled, not in aggression, but in control. Every instinct in his body screamed not to trust. But he stood still. Grace reached into the kit. "Fluids, local anesthetic, scalpel, saline." The team moved fast, practiced. No wasted motion. The cub stirred faintly as the needle pricked his skin. Grace steadied his head. Michael leaned close. "It's full. We're going in." The first incision released a burst of pressure. Thick, foul-smelling fluid streamed from the wound. The smell hit like a wave, sharp and sour. But with it came a sound, small, faint, but unmistakable. Koa whimpered. Elias stepped forward. Grace froze. Her hand lifted slowly, palm open. "It's okay," she said, soft as breath. "We're helping him." Elias didn't blink, but he didn't come closer. He sat 10 feet away, body tense, not threatening, not leaving, watching, trusting. Michael flushed the wound with saline, cleaning away the infection. The cub winced once, then stilled. His breathing, once shallow and chaotic, began to find a rhythm. Still weak, still fragile, but alive. "We'll need wildlife antibiotics," Michael murmured. "Long-acting. If the infection hits the brain, it's over." Grace nodded. "Start the first dose now." The wound was wrapped gently in gauze. A thermal blanket was pulled over the cub's small frame. Another tech radioed the mobile clinic. They would leave a monitoring team on site, but Koa couldn't be moved. Not yet. Not without risking everything, and Elias would never allow it. The father lion lowered himself beside the cub again, not touching, just close enough. His body curved like a barrier between his son and the world. Grace watched them. "I've never seen anything like this," she said, more to herself than to anyone. Michael turned to her. "Will he make it?" "We bought him time," she said. "The rest is up to him." And to Elias. The team packed their tools. No one rushed, no one raised their voice. Every movement was deliberate, quiet. The wild had granted them this space, and they would not break it. Before leaving, Grace stepped as close as she dared. She met Elias's eyes again. She didn't speak. She simply placed her hand on her chest and nodded once. Elias blinked, then looked back to Koa. The sun dipped low as they walked away. And behind them, beneath the tree that had sheltered so much pain, a lion father lay watchfully beside his healing son. The story wasn't over. It was just beginning. And somewhere on the edge of the wild, love had taken a new shape, one not ruled by teeth or territory, but by the quiet courage to ask for help. The fourth night was colder than the ones before, a kind of cold that came not from wind or air, but from exhaustion, from silence, from the stillness that crept in after the adrenaline had faded, after the fight was over, but long before peace could take its place. Elias lay beside his cub, his body forming a wide crescent around Koa's trembling form. The boy still breathed. The wound had been cleaned, the eye wrapped, but the fever hadn't broken. The scent of antiseptic lingered on the cub's fur, foreign and sharp, mixing with the fading odor of rot. Koa's breathing rattled now and then, shallow, and each time Elias would lift his head and nudge him gently, then lay back down, pressing closer. He did not sleep, not truly. His eyes would close, but his ears never stopped moving. Far in the distance, The drone returned. This time it hovered, a blinking green light against the dark sky, faint but deliberate. It circled once, twice, then disappeared westward. Elias followed its path with his eyes, but didn't rise. He was no longer the lion he had been just days before. His body was thin, ribs faintly visible beneath the golden fur. His left rear paw had begun to swell, an old wound reopened. But he didn't limp now, because he didn't move. He stayed. The humans had not returned yet. A promise had been made. Medical support would be stationed nearby, hidden in the brush, with one-way radio and solar-powered refrigeration. But they would not interfere unless needed. The wild had spoken, and the humans had listened. At sunrise, the savannah awoke around them. A small herd of oryx passed in the distance. Birds rose in spirals from the nearby trees. Life continued, indifferent as it always had been. But not for Elias. He stood and stretched slowly, wincing as the paw hit the dry ground. He took 3 steps, found a new spot beneath the tree's shadow, and lay back down, his gaze never leaving Koa. That morning, Grace returned. She didn't come in a truck this time. She came on foot, with only a medical bag slung over one shoulder and a radio clipped to her belt. Her boots made soft imprints in the dust. Her movements were slower now, less clinical. She was here not just as a doctor, but as a witness. Koa stirred faintly at the sound. Grace crouched at a safe distance, opened the kit, and waited. Elias watched. She removed a syringe, filled with another dose of wildlife antibiotics, long-acting, crucial if the infection was to be truly pushed back. She didn't move closer. Instead, she placed the syringe carefully on a flat rock and backed away. Then she sat. Minutes passed. Then more. Elias didn't move. He looked at the syringe, then back at her. Grace didn't expect him to understand. But somehow he did. When she rose to leave, she left the antibiotic behind. That afternoon, the wind shifted again. This time, it brought the vultures. A small group, gliding low over the ridge, circling. They didn't land, but they waited. And Elias saw them. He rose, slow but deliberate, and walked into the open. He stood tall, his mane lifted slightly by the breeze, his frame lean but commanding. He faced the sky and without hesitation let out a roar. It wasn't long, it wasn't loud, but it was clear. Not yet, not today. The vultures drifted elsewhere. That night, as the stars reappeared, another visitor came. Not human, not scavenger, a female lion. She emerged from the darkness like a whisper, cautious, her body low to the ground. She smelled of dry grass and old heat. Her flanks were sunken, her eyes alert. She was alone. A nomad, likely, like Elias had been before. She saw him from a distance. She saw Koa. She did not come closer. Elias stood between them, not aggressively, but firm. His body was enough. The lioness waited, watched, then turned, and disappeared into the dark. She would not challenge a father who had already defied nature. As the night wore on, Koa stirred again. His paw shifted, a breath deeper than before. Then another. Elias leaned in, gently nosing the cub's shoulder. Koa whimpered softly, then stilled. But he was still there, and the warmth in his body hadn't left. In a small medical tent 2 ridges away, Grace marked the time on her clipboard. The fever hadn't spiked again. The swelling had reduced by almost half. Signs of improvement were slow, but real. "This cub," she murmured, "has more protection than half the species on this continent." Michael looked up from his equipment. "Because his father never left." "No," Grace said, "because his father never stopped believing there was something softer in the world than instinct. The humans had done what they could: antibiotics, wound irrigation, environmental monitoring with GPS. But the real treatment, the one no manual could teach, was loyalty. and love. That night, Elias rested more fully than before. His ears still twitched, his breath stayed slow, but for the first time in 6 days, his muscles relaxed. His body pressed closer to Koa, not in defense, but in comfort. They both slept beneath the same sky that had nearly taken everything from them. And somewhere nearby, silent and unseen, the wildlife medical team stood by, not as intruders, but as guardians of something sacred. Tomorrow would bring new risks: heat, infection, predators. But tonight, under the whispering trees, there was quiet. And in the heart of the Serengeti, where survival is never guaranteed, one cub lived because his father had dared to ask for help. Not with words, but with presence, with sacrifice, with the last soft thing left in the wild: love. The 5th morning arrived quiet, with the air cool and heavy, pressing low across the plain like a blanket damp with memory. The trees barely moved. The grass lay still. And under the wide branches of the thorn tree, Elias opened his eyes to the sound of breathing, not ragged or gasping, but even. Weak, yes, but steady. Koa's chest rose and fell in a rhythm that no longer seemed borrowed. His body, curled beneath the thermal blanket left by the humans, twitched now and then, not from pain, but from dreaming. Elias shifted his weight slowly and brought his nose to rest just beside the cub's cheek. He didn't touch. He just listened, felt. For the first time in 6 days, the tension in Elias's muscles lessened. He stretched one foreleg forward and rested his chin on it, eyes never leaving Koa's face. The infection had not won, but it hadn't surrendered either. From the edge of the clearing, a rustle in the grass. The sound was soft, intentional. Elias turned his head but did not rise. It was Grace again, this time without a bag or gloves. Only a notepad tucked under one arm and a thermos in her hand. She knelt at a respectful distance and took a long look at the scene in front of her. Koa, still breathing. Elias, still guarding. She had seen 1,000 recoveries in her career, each one different, most of them clinical. But nothing like this. This wasn't just a rescue. It was a decision made not by a human, but by a lion who had chosen trust over instinct, love over law. Michael joined her minutes later. He crouched beside her and pulled out a compact veterinary tablet, lightweight, solar-powered, fitted with a custom wildlife health tracking app. He tapped twice and the small screen lit up. "Temp holding stable," he whispered. "Inflammation's down. Discharge has slowed." Grace nodded slowly. "We still need to irrigate once more. If the abscess closes too soon, pressure will build again." Michael hesitated. "Do you think he'll let us?" Grace didn't answer immediately. Elias turned back toward them. He didn't growl. He didn't retreat. He watched. Grace stood slowly and picked up a small bottle of sterile saline from the satchel nearby. She walked forward 3 steps, then crouched, arm extended, placing the bottle gently on the ground, halfway between her and Elias. Then she backed away. The space between them was filled with sun, dust, and something deeper: understanding. Elias approached the bottle after she'd gone. He sniffed it once, then turned back to Koa. They waited. 30 minutes later, when Grace returned with gloves on and Michael carrying the portable first aid kit, Elias stood and took 2 steps back. Not far, just enough. They worked quickly. The dressing was peeled back. The tissue beneath had begun to regenerate. Koa flinched once as the cool solution flushed through the cavity, then stilled. Michael cleaned the area, applying new topical antibiotics. "Still some swelling in the sinus pocket," he murmured, "but the worst is over." Grace reached into the kit for the gauze wrap, then froze. Koa had lifted his paw, not high, not fast, just enough to place it gently against Elias's foreleg. A touch, barely there. But Elias leaned into it, closing the space between them. No sound, no movement, just connection. Grace stepped back, her hands trembling. "Finish rapping," she whispered. Michael's voice was tight. "I never thought I'd see this." Grace nodded. "Neither did I." The rap was light, breathable, designed for wildlife in motion. Elias watched each movement, his body rigid with stillness. When they were done, he stepped forward again, reclaiming his place beside the cub. Michael backed away. Grace lingered one moment longer, then said, almost too softly, "You did it, big guy." Elias blinked once, and then lay down. The sun crept higher. Vultures circled but stayed distant. The drone returned overhead, capturing new footage for the reserve's archive and the medical team's conservation documentation. The feed transmitted to a central hub over satellite, a secure wildlife monitoring center that used AI algorithms to detect signs of distress or change in vital behavior across endangered species populations. Those technologies had changed the way wildlife was protected, but no data model could measure what they had just witnessed. Love doesn't fit inside a graph. Later that afternoon, a secondary vet team arrived to install a small camouflaged observation station with remote sensors and battery-powered medical refrigeration. They checked the gauze, swapped the thermal blanket for a new one, refreshed the field antibiotics. They never touched Elias. They didn't need to. From the ridge above, Grace and Michael watched it all. "You think he knows he saved his son?" Michael asked. Grace folded her arms. "I think he knows he did something that mattered. That's enough." Michael looked toward the plains. "You think people will believe this?" She smiled faintly. "Doesn't matter. He didn't do it to be believed." She reached into her pack and pulled out a thin tag. On it, a number, a name, KOA. "Just in case," she said. Michael nodded. "We'll tag the data but leave the body wild." That's how it should be. The wind changed direction near sunset. It carried with it the scent of rain. Not heavy, not yet, but enough to stir life. Grass blades shivered. Birds returned to the trees. And beneath the wide expanse of sky, a father and son lay together in silence. There were no headlines, no cameras, only breath, only warmth, only love. And for one brief, impossible moment, the Serengeti seemed to hold still for them both. The sixth dawn arrived not with trumpets of light or glory, but with a quiet gentleness. It crept in slowly, gold brushing the tops of the trees, catching in the dew left behind by the night's faintest mist. Somewhere to the east, a herd of zebra moved like shadows through the tall grass, and a lone bird called out once, then fell silent again. Under the shade of the thorn tree, the lion did not move. Neither did the cub, but they were not still in the way they had once been. Koa's chest lifted in a slow, full breath. No rattle, no hesitation. His head, though still low, was no longer slumped, and in the pale morning light his right eye opened fully. The left remained covered by the dressing, but the good eye blinked once, then again, and tracked a fluttering insect as it danced through a beam of sun. Elias, already awake, turned his head toward the movement. He saw it too, not the bug, the blink, the shift, the return. For the first time in 6 days, Elias rose without effort. His limbs stretched wide. He paced a short arc around the base of the tree, careful not to disturb the cub, then circled back and lay down again. Koa lifted his paw, pressing it against his father's front leg. This time, the touch held strength. Deliberate, measured, present. A few feet away, hidden behind brush and a wildlife camera lens, Grace watched from the observation post. She said nothing. Michael stood beside her, arms crossed, lips pressed tight against a smile he didn't dare show yet. "Vitals still strong," he whispered. "No swelling overnight. No signs of neuroloss." "He's stabilizing," Grace said. "He might actually keep the eye." Grace didn't answer right away. She lowered the binoculars and looked at the image frozen on the wildlife camera monitor. A father lion curled protectively around his son. No textbook, no field journal, no wildlife documentary had ever prepared her for this. Not just the survival, but the choice. The will, the love. Later that morning, a crew from a conservation media program arrived. Quiet. Minimal. 2 camera operators and a wildlife journalist with a calm voice and respectful eyes. They were there to capture a story, but only what nature allowed. Grace let them set up on the far ridge using long lenses, keeping the hum of their equipment low and their voices lower. Their images would go on to touch millions, on television screens, on laptops, in classrooms and symposiums and conference halls. But not yet. For now, they were simply witnesses to a moment too sacred to narrate. Midday approached. The sun rose higher, but the breeze remained cool. Under the tree, Koa stirred. He stretched shakily, his small limbs wobbling under his own weight. His legs hadn't moved like this in days, muscles atrophied, joints stiff. But he pushed, hard. And slowly, awkwardly, the cub sat up. The humans froze. The cameras stopped. Grace held her breath. Koa's head tilted to one side. He blinked, then looked around. Elias moved immediately, not with panic, but with presence. He stood beside his son and gently pressed his forehead to Koa's. A soft rumble vibrated from deep within the father's chest, a sound of approval, of welcome. Koa didn't fall. He stayed up, shaky, but up. The 6th day hadn't taken him. It had given him back. The footage recorded that morning would later win awards. The still photo, father and son, nose to nose beneath the ancient tree, would appear in museums and magazines and conservation reports. But none of those captured the full story. Not the 6 days without rest. Not the decision to trust humans. Not the moment Elias turned his back on instinct and walked toward the unknown. The story was more than survival. It was a blueprint of courage, of fatherhood, of something almost too human to name. The medical team would return once a day for the next 2 weeks. No more interventions were needed, just quiet monitoring. Oral doses of long-acting wildlife antibiotics delivered through meat, tucked near the base of the tree. Koa accepted them without fight. Elias, always watching, allowed it. They would not be moved to a facility. Grace knew better. The wild was their home. And Koa would recover here or not at all. A month later, satellite imagery would confirm the pair had moved further south toward thicker brush and richer hunting lands. Koa's gait, tracked through motion sensors, showed balance, precision. Full strength returned. And the eye? He kept it. Clouded at first, but clear by week 6. The scar remained, a reminder that even in a world ruled by fang and claw, there is space for mercy. When the conservation team finally broke down the last of the field equipment, Grace paused by the base of the tree. She placed one gloved hand gently on the dry trunk. The bark was rough, furrowed, but beneath it, life still moved, sap, slow and unseen. She nodded once, then walked away. The plains stretched long ahead, unbroken and wild. But somewhere within them, a cub lived, because a father refused to give up, because he chose something beyond survival, because for 6 long, unrelenting days he believed there was another way. And for once, the wild agreed.